You were selling motorcycles,
Yep.
dirt bikes.
Selling motorcycles.
Yeah.
And it was actually a crazy story because I was working at the dealership, and when we had to move out of the house, I think we had like 3 weeks until I had to get out of there. Like it was like and I had nothing ready.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually got a call from one of the buddies. It was actually like someone was looking after me because Quinn called me.
Yeah.
Guy never talked to on the regular. He's like, hey, I heard you're moving and you need a place.
Yeah.
Went and looked at the place, and it was like almost like a sign from God almost.
Really?
Like, hey, yeah, it was pretty cool. It was like, and then ended up.
Did you have a plan at that point? Like
no. I had no plan.
Because this whole time you lived at home.
Yep.
Right? You weren't out on your own yet.
No.
And now you're kind of being forced out.
Getting forced
and
out.
You didn't have the option to live with either parent. It was just now it's time to go out on your own.
Yeah, my mom said, hey, if you want to move in, you can. I was like, you know what, Mom, I have to make a change. I have to figure this out. Like, going to live with you, I love you. I'm here to support you and everything else. But I was like, if I move in with you, I won't grow. Personally.
You knew that at that time.
Yeah. I was like, I got to suffer and figure it out.
Right. So your buddy calls. You got a place. You're working at the motocross dealership or the dealership. And around this time is when you stopped racing. Focus on basically adulting.
Yeah, being an adult. Yeah.
Now, prior to getting that job, had you been in sales at all or no?
That I actually went to school to be like a technician and work on them.
Okay.
And then I kind of went from there. I broke my wrist from racing.
Oh, that's right. You were a mechanic at first, right?
Mechanic. Then I worked in the parts department. I went to sales. And then ended up doing that and then being like sales manager. So.
Did you want to get into sales? Were you kind of pushed in that direction? How'd that happen?
I don't think so. Like I didn't look at sales. I was like, oh, I really want to be a technician. And it kind of just like. I was like, man, I like this. I think, and I started like doing it more and more and getting involved more into sales.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved.
What'd you like the most about it?
I like the adrenaline of it. I love when we were selling motorcycles. It was cool because people were like, they enjoyed it. They were getting something they wanted, and like seeing their face. It was cool. As far as that goes, and just bettering myself. Like I knew I could get better at sales and doing it. So it was cool.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier reading some books. Did you get any personal development back then, or was that when you joined us?
When I joined here.
Yeah, got it. So how many years were you working at this dealership for?
I worked there for almost 10 years, but like nine years. Yep.
Got it. And I know you had a situation towards the end that really kind of, I guess, put a bad taste in your mouth. Buddy of yours passed away, or his dad?
Yeah, one of my best friends, his father had passed away, actually, of a heart attack.
Yeah.
And so ended up doing that, and I was telling him I worked 6 days a week, never took any days off during the week, and ended up going to the funeral. And he's like, hey, you don't show up, don't plan on coming back. So I was like, okay, if that's how it's gonna be.
This is like you weren't like a repeat offender. Like I'm calling out twice a week, or every 2 weeks someone dies in your family. Sales people you love. It's like, dude, your dad's passed 4 times now.
Yeah.
Like how many dads do you have? Like, or maybe use a different excuse, right?
Yeah.
But you weren't one of the. You're like, I'm busting my ass working 6 days a week, and this guy passed who you were pretty close with.
Yeah, really close. He was like a father to me. I knew him for 25 years. Wow. I played hockey when I was 3. He was bringing me to the games. So.
Oh, shit. So you let your boss know ahead of time, like, hey, this happened.
Yeah, and it was still show up. You got to be here, come in for an hour or two. I'm like,
it's a funeral.
I'm going to a funeral. Like, it's emotional.
Yeah.
For, knowing them and seeing what happened and everything else, it was crazy. So.
Got it. And then what happened? You got fired?
Yeah, so I ended up not showing up, which I told him I wasn't going to. Right. And then showed up Monday, and I was fuming already because I knew what I was going into.
Yeah.
So, threw my jacket on the desk. He's like, oh, come into my office. So I was like, oh, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I was ready to go to war. So, and he's like, I thought about it all weekend, and it was around Thanksgiving time because it was in November.
Yeah.
And he's like, I thought about it all weekend, how I was going to keep you. And I was like, well, I thought about it all weekend, how I wasn't going to be here.
Wow.
So I was like, he's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, listen, I'll take my pink stuff, figure something out.
Yeah.
And go do, that's kind of how it ended.
Got it. And you had not found out about us yet? You weren't working with us yet, right?
Nope, I wasn't working with you. Yeah. I worked for Eric Anthony when he was working at the dealership.
Okay.
And back in 2017 is when he went, which I wish I would have done it earlier,
Got it. So you knew kind of about us through Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he try to recruit you at all?
He did a couple times. Yeah. He definitely tried to get me to get life insurance, which I know I have a bunch now. Yeah. But back at the time, I was like, I don't think I need it.
Right.
But seeing the impact of it now, it's different.
Yeah.
You know, I look at it a lot different. So, yeah, he talked to me a lot about it then.
What did you think about the sales or, like, working here when he offered it to you?
Yeah, at the time, I was like, I didn't really know a lot about it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think looking at the aspect of it, I was like, I don't know how you would make the pay and all that stuff too. So I was like, I was confused. I wish I jumped in and just took the risk and did it instead of waiting, 3 years or whatever it was to actually get going with it. So.
Got it. Yeah, because he left in 2017, right?
Yep.
And then when did you?
2021 in April.
In April. Got it. But at that point, like I said, you didn't have a license. You weren't even really thinking about us. You just were like, hey, I'm not working here no more because of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do next?
So actually, believe it or not, I actually went back. I did the stupidest thing.
Did you really?
2 months I went back. So I ended up doing that, and I was like, I was looking for an out. I was like, I had to find something that I could do.
Why'd you go back? You just couldn't find anything?
Well, I was like, at first, everybody was like, "Oh, Gary, come back." A lot of coworkers and stuff like that, they were like, "Come back. We want you here. We want you to come back and work with us and everything else." So I was like, I finally pulled the trigger, and I was like, "Well, listen, I'm not coming back with an apology unless I get an apology." Definitely, like, hey, I messed up. I made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
So they ended up doing that. I went back for a couple years, but I was already kind of like on my way out. I was just looking for that next thing to get me out of there.
Yeah. You just go back because you needed a job and you knew this one was secure.
Yeah. It was comfort.
Comfort, yeah.
Realistically, right? I went back for it because it was comfortable. Yeah. So.
But the whole time where you were thinking what your next move was going to be.
Yeah, I was like, I knew this wasn't forever. My grandfather even said it to me. He's like, hey, once that happened, I knew you weren't going to be here much longer. Yeah. It was just a ticking time bomb. It was time, So I knew it. I wish I would have done something then,
So what ended up happening? How did you find, or why did you make the decision to join us?
So back in 2021, it was right around January, February time.
Okay.
My in-laws, right, which I love them to death, they're down there in Florida, West Palm.
Okay.
So me and my wife, we went down there, go visit them for a week or whatnot, and then I know Eric Anthony was down in Boca, which is only a half hour from West Palm. So he had texted me, he said, hey, I know you're down here, come by, stop by and visit. So I was like, okay, yeah, me and Danielle we took a ride on the boat and everything else. I actually went driving by on the intercoastal there, right near Sean's house and looking at all that.
Did you know Sean at the time?
No, I didn't, no.
Got it.
And then we were just on the boat and we were just kind of talking. I was like, hey, man, I'm not really happy where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I saw what Eric Anthony was doing and how successful he was.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I got to make the jump. He's like, I'll get you, take the course, get your license. I went back. Flew back, and I started taking the course. It took me like 3-4 weeks. I didn't do it like in a record time. Yeah. Because after I flew back to Connecticut in February, I was going through the course after work. So I would get out of work at 8 o'clock, and I would study till like.
Yeah. What was your work schedule like? You said 6 days a week, right?
6 days a week. I'd get there right around like 9:30. Probably wouldn't end up leaving till 8 o'clock.
Got it.
A lot of times, too, it was just kind of like, for me, it was a bad scene where because we'd all be out there drinking and doing that after work. It was long days and wouldn't get home till 10, and my wife, too, even said at a point, like, hey, we're going to have to figure something out. Like, you're going to have to change something. We're not going to be able to grow. We're not going to have kids this way. And
what'd you think when she said that to you?
I was like, man, I felt kind of like I disappointed her.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I knew I had to make a change. I knew I had to impact my life. I knew it was better. Like and that's where kind of like accountability, like, hey, I got to step up and do something different, find a pathway out, you know? So ended up doing that, got my license. I tried helping families in the field, didn't know what the heck I was doing, right?
Were you still working at the dealership?
Yeah. Once I got my license and I passed it, I put in my 2 weeks notice.
Oh, you did?
Yep.
You had that much faith in this and yourself, Bo? Like, how did you know that was the right thing to do?
I said to my wife, I said, hey, these next 2 months is probably going to be a little brutal at the beginning, but I said, if we figure this thing out, it's going to impact, it's going to make a difference.
Got it.